And welcome back to a fresh episode of Business Growth Show. I'm your host, Sam Dunning, co-owner over at webchoiceuk.com. And if you haven't done so yet, check out my weekly emails where I share actionable B2B marketing, website tips, podcasts, useful goodies, and more over at businessgrowth.email. So joining me today, I've got Dustin Tysick. Dustin is the VP of Revenue over at Testimonial Hero. Dustin, welcome to the show, sir. How are we?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Sam. Looking forward to it.
Always a pleasure, my friend. So yeah, today we're going to be chatting exactly how customer stories can scale not only trust, but revenue, cash in the bank as well. A double hitter. So first and foremost, Dustin, what does a customer story really mean?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think, historically, customer stories are, this is the company that used our product. This is how they used it. This is the result. But I think really there's more than that. And you really have to focus on the individual and how you made their job to be done easier and how you actually help them as a person and position them as a hero. And then once you capture that story, there's a lot of steps after that we can talk through on how to distribute it, how to ask the questions. But at the heart of a customer story, I really think that's what it is.
Okay. And what's the point of them? What's the outcome? What can we achieve from customer stories?
Yeah, I mean, you outlined it a bit at the front. It's really building trust and hearing from someone like you, right, who is trying to solve the same problems, probably in a similar company. There's G2, logo clouds, all that stuff. I think marketers in particular are becoming a little jaded because they know how that game works, right? But hearing an actual person talk through it just builds that trust and makes it easier to get someone to sign on and, ultimately get you revenue.
Got it. Okay. And when we say customer stories, what are we talking about here? Because when I hear customer stories, probably two or three things come into my mind. Dustin. I'm thinking like testimonials, maybe a classic testimonial site on a website, maybe like you said, like G2, Capterra, or Clutch, like your well-ranked listing sites that you see when you do Google searches, maybe videos, maybe written case studies on websites. So what are we talking? Are we talking all above? Are we talking something specific?
Yeah, I'd say all of the above, but what I really focus on is the testimonial side. So my view there is there's kind of checkbox customer content and stories that you need. So, G2 or the Gartner network like Capterra, and that is kind of an example. They go there and make sure you're actually legit and you're a real company and, people like you. But further down from that, there's the actual individual customer stories tied to industry, persona, outcome, objections, and really that more niche topic that you have to target out to the right people.
Okay. So targeting and persona based. So I know we're going to walk through a bit of a step-by-step shortly of how that can impact the ways it can build trust at different parts of the sales cycle. Do you think that's often neglected? Do you think there's times, Dustin, where perhaps B2B companies place too much emphasis on testimonials at certain parts of the sales cycle?
For sure. And I am 100% guilty of this as well in past roles where I had my little Google sheet with, okay, I need case studies from these industries, this company size. And it was kind of just a checkbox, right? I had to get this thing on the website for sales to use, for me to say, yeah, we created a case study. And I think that's still how a lot of companies handle it. So the problem there is, honestly, when was the last time you read a full case study? Maybe I just don't have the attention span, but I won't sit there and do it. I look and say, cool, a company like me, check. So I think that's where companies go wrong, and I've gone wrong before, is not really thinking through the distribution and the actual story and getting eyeballs on it.
You're exactly right. I mean, at best, you're probably going to flick through it on a website, right? Especially a hefty case study. So you're probably going to flick through the main pain points and results achieved, maybe the logos they worked with, flick at a testimonial, and that's probably about it, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we've heard about the 3% rule, right? Where 3% of your audience roughly is buying at any time. So best case scenario in the world, you get those 3% to your website. Probably not going to happen. What percentage of those are actually going to read the case study? So, you're asking for valuable customer time. You're creating a story that probably has amazing points in it, but it's just not getting that exposure. And it's at that one stage of the funnel.
And are there any kind of glaringly obvious mistakes that companies tend to make when it comes to either capturing testimonials or putting them out there for the market to see?
Yeah, I think not having it from the first person of the buyer is one, not really a mistake, but it's kind of the traditional way things have gone, right? And a lot of companies are moving away from this, and it is kind of the old way. But you'd see a case study where the first paragraph is this company was founded in 1992. They have all these locations, and before you get to the meat of it and like the actual results, you got to wade through this giant intro. So I think that's part of it. So even just flipping it and almost having it editorial style, right? Like Influitive does this with their upshots of someone telling their own story
Right.
makes a difference.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like getting to the point rather than kind of beating around the bush.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a attention span thing or just what we're used to, but that short form content, I mean, you do a podcast, you chop things up, you know how it works. You need that, right? It's that little trigger to get people to listen more.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, there's a lot of debate, especially on LinkedIn now, when around video, like what's most effective. Like I've
Yeah.
seen as of now, I mean, we're recording 15th of December 2022 at the time of this actual recording, and video seems to have tanked on LinkedIn reach at the moment for me anyway,
Mhm.
which is weird because before it was awesome, and now the impressions seem to be right down at the time of recording. It seems to be image posts linked with text seem to be doing the best. But algorithms aside,
Yeah.
video seem to be, like you say, getting much shorter. A
Mhm.
lot of people used to put kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 minute videos up, whereas now they're typically under 60 seconds. Most of what I see in the feed anyway, from kind of B2B marketers, tech companies, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say like there's the traditional case study, which we talked about, then the traditional testimonial, which is that 90-second, 2-minute video that it has its place, right? Like it's a video case study, but you're probably not going to get a ton of views on that on LinkedIn organic, or if you're running a demand gen ad, just because it can be a lot to sit through. So you need to chop up that content and have your 15-second version, maybe even a 6-second for a YouTube bumper, a 30-second, all those different points, and match
Mm.
the length and the content to where the buyer is in their journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I think even myself, like when you think of especially video content, video testimonials, you don't naturally think of, I certainly don't, of using them for maybe YouTube pre-roll
Mhm.
or chopping them up in some of these lesser known platforms. Well, not that YouTube's lesser known, but I think ad roll is lesser known, certainly by
Yep.
most of the people that I've known or work with. But yeah, well, let's jump into that. I want to get into this step-by-step walkthrough
Mhm.
where we can map out personas and make best use of our testimonials. So with that, what is the first thing when it comes to making sure we're putting out effective testimonials that are going to build trust with our target market and are going to speed up sales cycles and impact revenue? What's the first thing that we should either do or prepare for?
Yeah. So, but before even talking about like where they live and how we promote them and all that, really understanding your persona and kind of the question, fears, and doubts that they have. So that's the first step we do usually is we walk through, as a buyer, what are they worried about? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And we
Okay.
map all that out so that when we ask the questions, we're asking the right thing and digging in on the right topics.
Mm,
Um, and I think how you ask the questions and having a skilled interviewer is highly underrated. There's kind of been this push to, those video surveys, right? Like Video Ask, where you send a link, it has a question on screen. Um, I host a podcast. I do these. Me talking to the camera with no one there is going to suck. Like it's just hard to be comfortable and create an authentic story. So I think it's having those questions and really thinking it out, and then having a really solid interviewer to actually dig in and ask the right questions and understand those needs.
mm. Yeah, you're right. It's certainly asking questions is a skill that you can adapt and you can build over time, and it's only something you can get really with practice.
Yeah.
Um, and when have you got any tips around how you guys tend to dig out those problems that buyers, prospective clients, buyers are actually going to care about?
Yeah. So it's honestly a lot of work up front, right? Like really thinking through those questions and asking them in a way that you can have content for the full funnel in advance. So often it's, you would ask the question, how long have you been using the product? What were the results? All of that. But even asking around, while you were buying, what are some of the objections you were worried about? Right. So,
Mm,
for example, we sell remote and on site testimonials. So, when we get a testimonial created for ourselves, one of the core concerns is, can a remote testimonial be good quality?
Mm.
So, we wanted to directly ask that and interview people who had that concern, and we overcame it in the sales cycle. Because good salespeople have their little like quiver full of these customer stories that they pull out an email, and it's very ad hoc. So we want to do that in a more systematized way, so we can say, totally get that. Here's a customer like you who felt that pain, and here's why they made the decision they did.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, that's another good thing, isn't it, with testimonials, especially video ones for the sales team, to whip those out as and when relevant to kind of build trust with prospects.
Yeah, 100%. And whether I'm biased to video because that's what we do, but we also promote our stuff in a variety of different formats, right? So quote cards, audiograms, just clips for emails, the whole gamut, which is important. But yeah.
Nice. Okay. So walking through the problems that the buyers actually want to solve and the common objections that you face, prepping out an interview or an
Hmm.
interviewee to
Yep.
conduct those with your customers. That's step one. What happens next?
Yeah. So step two, as simple as it sounds, is actually having the interview. And that's a legitimate skill. Like we kind of touched on that, right? It's not easy to make someone feel super comfortable. It's not easy to know when to dig in and ask follow-up questions. Like salespeople go through sales training for this for years, right? On how to ask effective questions and dig down. But that's really the key there is having that interview, whether in person, on site or remotely, and having a skilled interviewer. So you get an authentic, detailed response. I'm sure you've had, the parallel here is podcasts, right? So I'm sure you've had guests who give one word answers and you're like digging, trying to get something of value. It's kind of similar with customers, right? Like you'll have those people who aren't super lively, aren't giving you a lot. So you need to be prepared and ready to do that. And it's hard. Like it's not an easy
Yeah.
thing.
Oh yeah. It's podcasts, sales calls, discovery calls. They're not all that different.
100%.
It's a lot of it comes down to, I suppose it's a bit of give and take, but certainly the salesperson or the interviewer has to do a lot of the legwork in
Yep.
order to, depending on what the end objective is, I suppose, whether it's getting a great interview, providing actionable tips for, in your case, the prospects that might be listening to the testimonial, or in my case, to the podcast, or in the
Yep.
salesperson's case, then building trust and seeing if they can fix the problem or get some business done with the potential client. So yeah, I completely agree with that. So when it comes to conducting these interviews, is there like any sweet spots, any best practices around how long they should take? You mentioned there kind of prepping questions and things like that. Are there any other considerations we should put into play?
Yeah, I think time can vary. Like we are usually around that 30, 40-minute mark, which maybe seems long, right? Because we're producing, a full story testimonial that's 90 seconds plus some clips. But
Hmm.
it's important to have that raw footage. And again, like I view this kind of as like a content pillar piece, right? So a lot of people will use a live event or a podcast as their pillar. They'll chop it up, they'll write blog posts about it, they'll create content, audio, video, images. I view that the same way for a customer story. So having enough length and enough meat where you don't just come out with one asset after spending 40 minutes with a customer, you come out with a dozen assets. So that's kind of the way we look at it is customers' time is valuable. They're doing you a favor,
Hmm.
maximize it as much as you can.
That is a good point. It's not easy to get customer reviews,
No.
let alone customer video testimonials.
Yep.
Any tips for kind of making customers feel at ease and actually give up their time, like you say, 30, 40 minutes or longer? And especially if that's an on-site, then they're going to have to take time out that day.
Mhm.
Any tips for what works well for actually getting them to approve those?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Something we're working on a ton because it is hard. Like I've struggled with that before. The first step is finding the right people. So having some measure of what a successful customer's like and actually having communication between CS, sales, marketing, or whoever's actually capturing this. That's where the breakdown happens a lot of the time. Marketing
Mm.
wants to do a bunch of these and they ask CS. CS, ignores them, gives a couple suggestions. There's back and forth. Like we've all been there. So that's one part, right? Of actually figuring out who to ask. And then there's the how to ask. And it's almost like being a good SDR. You can't just spam a template email. I mean, you could, and you could play the numbers game. I don't recommend it. But it's really positioning your customer as the hero, explaining the value they would get out of this. It's it's easier in some cases than others, right? Like we sell to marketers. Marketers like to be out there and be exposed. So there is that part. But
Mm,
also just positioning as, you're a power user of this product. You've done all these great things. It would really help if we could tell your story to other potential customers.
yeah.
And framing it that way is important.
Yeah, yeah. You're in a good market. Selling to marketers is, I imagine, a lot easier to do this kind of sell for the testimonial as opposed to if you're in a more traditional industry where perhaps people are on site or maybe using technical machinery or stuff like that.
For
I
sure.
imagine that's
Yeah.
a lot tougher.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is. We also have customers who, get customer testimonials from, truckers out on the road as part of their customers. So you can do it in any industry. But honestly, yeah, it is a bit easier in tech, I would say, where we're kind of used to this world and reviews, testimonials.
Mm, got it. And when people are conducting these interviews, like you say, they could be 30, 40 minutes, so you can make sure you've got
Mhm.
enough content to chop up, slice and dice, mix around.
Yep.
Do you tend to do it stop and start, or do you recommend people just do like a solid script or like a one hitter, or is it very much like in this part we're going to talk about this, then we're going to move on to this, then we're going to do that?
Yeah, so we try to keep it as conversational as we can because it's more authentic that way. So what
Mm,
we'll do is we'll have our set, list of questions, and then if something really interesting comes up, you can either dig in and ask follow-up questions, or oftentimes we've also, this can be a little awkward, so you need a good interviewer again, but you can have them say, "That was a really great point. Do you think you could try to say that in a more concise way?" And kind of just repeat that thought a little quicker because sometimes people meander through their thoughts. We all do this.
mm,
So having
for
someone who
sure.
can catch like that is an awesome point. Let's just say it a little shorter and frame that in a nice way. It
Yeah,
is a nice little tip there.
yeah, yeah. Good. Okay, so we've held the interview.
Mhm.
We've got our footage. We've done a good job. What's next?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to skip over the editing, producing side, right? Because I think there's a million ways you can take that. So let's say you produce it in house, you hire someone to do it, you have that finished product.
Hmm.
What you really want to do here with the raw footage is map out to the funnel. And I kind of hate saying funnel because people don't buy that way, but I'm using the traditional unaware, problem aware, product aware decision,
Yep.
like that typical funnel,
Hmm.
and then map out a few things. So map out the touch points there. So where does your audience live? So take the unawareness phase, right? So people who aren't aware of us, we sell to B2B marketers. LinkedIn is a great channel for that, right? B2B marketers are quite active on there. The targeting is strong. So in our case, we would look on the unaware stage. We want the LinkedIn side, and we're going to run ads and organic content here. So that's step one, like map that out, right? So at the consideration stage where they're looking at you, figure out the length you want. So probably 45 seconds a minute, how sales is going to use it, and what you need to address there. So you map this out all along your journey, all the way to like renewal, front to back, right? You have to have that prepared. And then the next part, once you have the length, is to map the content. So what do people actually want to see at the front, right? Like when they're completely unaware, they don't know what your product does. They probably want to hear someone talking about the problem you solved because that might trigger like, oh, I have that problem too. This is kind of interesting,
Hmm.
rather than kind of a bottom funnel, super specific point that someone's making. So we map that out all along the journey. And then we get to work on actually creating that content, figuring out how to distribute and also how to measure it to see if it's successful.
Okay. Got it. All right. So we're starting with let's kind of take it step by step through
Mhm.
the funnel, as it were, from
Yep.
kind of unaware through to, let's say, problem aware, um, through to maybe considering your offer and then actually
Mhm.
taking the plunge, booking a demo, making the sale, whatever that next step
Exactly.
is. So talking about the problem you solve, which kind of links back to our first step, where we talked about kind of listing those out and asking the
Mhm.
customers we interview to walk through them. And then you mentioned kind of 45 seconds to 1 minute, distributing those on kind of relevant platforms, whether that's through ads or organic content. Is there a best practice in terms of this? And when I say that, Dustin, what I mean is, we recommend to attract unaware prospects that are in the market that might be kind of a good fit, let's say an ideal client. You should put out, I don't know, 4 or 5 of these videos that talk about the problem you fix and distribute them on X channels? And are there any best plays around this?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to vary so much. I hate to give a like maybe it depends answer, but like everything in marketing is kind of maybe it depends. But let's take the, you decide LinkedIn is your growth channel to build awareness, in particular LinkedIn ads, right? You're going to need that variety. You're going to have to keep an eye on frequency and also ad type, right? So yes, we produce videos. We think they're super powerful, but even in our case, like we will run a list of customer videos. We will have 5 or 6 running in a campaign at a time. We will have quote cards, so image ads. We will have carousel ads that are kind of like a sizzle reel of different things that people have said to build trust. Maybe we'll even clip a couple G2 reviews. So we're really mapping out that variety that matches to the particular channel or the particular medium that you're using there. So that's kind of our approach. And you do need variety. Like you could, but you probably shouldn't just do one of these interviews and just spam everyone with content from one interview. Like actually have a variety, do 5 or 6 of these interviews, generate 40, 50 pieces of content, and then you're set for a few quarters, right? You have a whole wealth of information there.
Got it. Okay. And I'm guessing on LinkedIn, organic, we don't really need to talk about because that's just posting it from your personal profiles. But in terms of the ad side of things, it sounds like you're doing a bit of a variety in terms of the type of ads you're putting out. And then I'm guessing you're just setting that up to distribute to idle client profiles.
Yeah, no, exactly. So like our approach there is, and we're kind of in a nice spot where we know our target audience. And, we can kind of have a list of these are the 8 to 10,000 companies that are in our ICP perfect fit. So that's kind of step one. We don't just use testimonials there, of course, right? We use other kinds, but testimonials are a huge chunk of what we do. And then once they interact or visit the website or take some action, they go into a remarketing stage that is a little more down the funnel, like really building trust, talking about the specifics, staying top of mind. And we kind of filter them down that way until they then get to our website and we have more customer proof there that is more detailed, longer than the 15-second ad they saw. So that's what we're kind of do is slowly nudge them down that journey and have more content as they get to each stage. So they don't just see the same, case study or the same video throughout the whole thing.
Anything that works well, in terms of a mid-funnel content play, i.e. like you said there, they've looked at your website, maybe they flicked on a few pages, maybe they flicked through your case studies, your pricing pages, and then flicked off.
Yeah, so we kind of take 2 approaches there, and it depends on what action they've taken, right? So if they're a little further along and we have some way to actually reach out or drip content through email or another source, we'll have videos at that stage that help. But we also use remarketing a lot for this. And you're really not going to know who the exact person is, right? Like it's going to be a marketer at this list of companies that visited your site. So we chunk things out into, were they on the site 30, 90, 180 days ago? What pages did they see as kind of a gauge of how far they are? And then we serve those ads, not just on LinkedIn, but across platforms.
Yep.
To hit them at that right spot there.
Okay. Any recommendations for YouTube pre-roll ads? You mentioned them earlier. We've not really talked about those at all on the show, or YouTube video ads in general. Any ideas or any lesser known ideas for when they can be effective? Are they effective? Are they worthwhile?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because it's something, honestly, we are not the best at. So in 2023, this is kind of a bit of our focus is how we can get better at this. And the tricky part here is those ads are super short. So you need a quick, 6-second clip that is interesting enough. And those are hard to get people to say. Like we have one that we run, maybe you'll see it on LinkedIn. If you visit our site, we're going to probably remarket you at this. But someone says going with Testimonial Hero was the opposite of buyer remorse. That's less than 6 seconds. It's an amazing quote. Like I couldn't write that. It's better than anything I could write. So you need those type of really quick hit ones there. The route we're going actually on YouTube as well is chopping some of the stuff up into shorts and, experimenting a bit with that more on the organic side. But I think there's an opportunity on paid. I just wish I was better at it. Like that's my goal for 2023 is figure this out.
Fair enough. A lot of marketing is experimentation though.
100%.
What works. We're messing around with YouTube Shorts at the moment. I've still far from cracked it, but just chopping up some podcast episode into short clips, and some will get hundreds, thousands of views, and then others will just flop. But it's fun to mess around with.
Yeah, if you figure that one out, let me know. Shoot me a message, we'll work on it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
happening anytime soon, but definitely will. Cool, man. So that's kind of middle of the funnel in the comparison and the learning stages, and then any recommendations for people that might be close to buying and what we should try and get in front of them.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is actually the most neglected space for testimonials, right? Like there's whole companies who will work with you to make sure you have your customer stories to talk about during a demo or in follow up and like build this bank for you.
Hmm.
But usually it's quotes, right? Like you have a little snippet in an email. Um, what we do is we kind of put it into three broad buckets, right? So we call them objection crushers. So common objections, you know what they are. They're probably things you address in like an FAQ on the site in a little bit of detail, but
Mhm.
mapping out what those common objections are and creating videos for them, creating videos on the cost of inaction. Like most of our deals aren't lost to competitors, they're lost to just inaction, people staying with the status quo,
Yep.
losing
Agree.
to indecision. So talking about, this is the old way I was doing it, these are the poor results, this is what happened, you need to do this right away. And then the third bucket is on competitive replacement. So this is going to vary. You probably don't want to just, dump on a competitor and talk about how they suck and all that. But if you can keep it broad enough where I switched from this competitor or this type of product because XYZ, that kind of hits the three of the main points during the sales process that a good salesperson will handle, but you can get your customers to do it and sell for you, which
Mm.
is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's solid tips, man. Like common objections, cost of inaction. Like you say, the status quo is certainly from my experience, and been selling a fair bit now. I guess what I'm 31 now, so probably a good 10, 11 years. And most of the time, the reason deals haven't gone through is because people just weren't facing a painful enough
Yeah.
problem to move from their current vendor. Um, Especially when you get into kind of selling high ticket
Hmm.
items or solutions. If your item is kind of quite complex, quite expensive, it involves a lot of other team members to move the decision and actually implement, then you better hope that your problem solves, or you better show the value in your problem solving some seriously kind of bleeding neck, juicy problems. Because if it doesn't, the customer's just going to stick with the devil they know, right?
100%. Yeah. Like something that's super integrated, like take Salesforce, right? A lot of
Mm,
people don't actually love using the product, but it integrates with everything and it's
mm,
so embedded. So if you're going against something like that, that's probably an extreme example, and
yeah,
you have to convince someone to rip that out, you better highlight, what happens if they don't? How is
yeah,
this affecting them? Like Dooley kind of did this with Salesforce and note taking and how, you're wasting all this time in there. You need us. If you don't, this is going to happen. So
yeah.
really mapping that out and thinking through it.
Nice. And then competitor displacement. That's always a funny one. We've had
Mhm.
episodes on this show a little bit where we've talked about that with things like Google paid search, Google AdWords, where you do the old XVY,
Yeah.
competitor A v competitor B. It's a play that people do on ads, play that people do a little bit of SEO with like dedicated landing pages with you versus your competitor. It's a play that the review websites do, G2,
Mhm.
Capterra, etc. So it's known. You've got to be careful because there can be legal issues with it,
Yep. Yeah.
especially when you use competitors' names in certain lights. So you've got to be careful. How'd you do it with video?
Yeah. So I've done those ads as well, and those, us versus them, and you get a little cease and desist letter like, don't use this. This isn't true. So I think that's too risky doing that head to head. Like I would focus it more on your point of view and how something about you is actually different from the bulk of a group of competitors.
Right.
Right. So our case, one bucket of competitors are those like video survey tools,
Okay.
right? Where you send a link to a customer, it pops up a question, they answer. So instead of attacking those and naming them and like that's a lose-lose situation. We will talk about the value of having a producer and an interviewer so you get authentic conversations versus generic scripted results. So that's
I
our
see.
competitive replacement and competitive comparison. And I think from a conceptual point of view, that's a little stronger than like this feature sucks, our feature is better.
Yeah. 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 So you're essentially saying like you're not naming any competitors. You're really saying like how your offer shines above theirs, and like the benefits that you'll bring to the table compared to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And maybe we target some of the keywords or remarket to some of their audience, but we won't, call them out by name. We're just going to do that conceptual, our point of view versus theirs.
Got it, man. Are there any points that we haven't covered on this step by step?
I guess the only other one, and we haven't tapped into it as much, is like people often stop at the revenue side, right? But now it's hard to sell in this environment for certain products, right? So net retention and like actually keeping your customers and actually upselling them is important. So a bit of an untapped market there is that exactly, right? So say you're a SaaS company, you're rolling out a new product, you've beta tested it, you have a few happy customers. That's a great point for testimonials, right? Like interview those customers, capture what they liked about it, and then use that for your bigger rollout. So you actually have customer proof and, you can target that to the right people. So that's something we're looking to expand more and help customers with, just given the times. Keeping your customers is easier than finding new ones. So we want to help them do that.
Yeah. It's not something I thought about in a great deal as well. I mean, bringing, like you say, it's so much cheaper to keep and upsell existing customers than it is to acquire net new business. Another thing that I tend to do, which I neglect, but certainly our team should do a lot more, is using video in general to bring new ideas to the table to your existing customers. Not just we've got a new feature, buy it, but more so, have you thought about doing this, like with widget? Like, did you know widget A could do this, and this could be useful to grow your business in this aspect? For you, it'll be something relevant to your video offer. For me, it might be, did you know we could tweak your call to actions to be more descriptive, and it might increase conversion rate?
Yep.
Things like that. Bringing new ideas to the table that aren't necessarily going to cost your customers more, but are going to show that you're actively interested in helping them growing their business, growing their revenue, sharing new thoughts, best practices. And then maybe a few months later, you can introduce a new service and upsell them.
For sure. And I think like people hear testimonial and they think customers, right? Like it's just customers. We actually also help companies do employee testimonials, which is kind of like you're describing. So be it thought leadership, product launch, that type of thing. Having a senior person at the company or multiple people talking about why they created this product, why it matters, intertwining with clips, like those are also testimonials in our mind. So 100% agree. Those can work really well.
Any, before we wrap things up, what about with prospecting? Any nice use cases that you found where perhaps your team or other teams have used these for reaching out cold, whether that is email, LinkedIn, other social channels, or elsewhere?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we're kind of in a unique situation internally for us where like our product is testimonial, so we can send examples, and that's a perfect fit for prospecting. But in general, including video links of someone telling your story is great. That's something I think people always do often do the, Vidyard, click record, here's my pitch, here's my story part, which is great. And I think that actually works quite well. But we do have customers who will integrate some of those examples and those short 15-second clips into their outreach. So say, instead of honestly, be honest with it. So say, I'm an SDR, you probably get a bunch of these requests. So I want one of our customers to tell you why you should do XYZ and include a clip. It might be different enough to actually stand out from the sea of, those emails we get. So I think there's lots of plays there that could be interesting.
Definitely. I mean, video alone, like the amount of trash LinkedIn messages, emails that I get on a daily basis, I'm sure you're the same, and most people tuning in, like, can't tell you the last time I did get a custom video message today, so that was nice, but that was the first one in ages. The only ones that I occasionally get are just generic ones. So certainly a good way to stand out from the noise.
For sure. Yeah.
Dustin, it's been a pleasure, sir. Thanks very much for taking us through the customer story, testimonial, video best plays and practices. Shared some really useful and helpful tips. So appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was a fun one.
No worries. So please do tell us more about how everyone tuning in can learn more about your company, how they can connect with you, and anything you'd like to share with the audience.
Yeah, 100%. So best way to connect with me is LinkedIn, Dustin Tysick. It's not a common last name. You'll find me pretty easy. So you can do that. For the company, it's testimonialhero.com. So you can head over there, look at the examples, look at some content and get ideas. Even if you decide to do this on your own, there's some useful stuff there. And then shameless podcast plug. We also host B2B Revenue Leaders, which is a podcast. So if you like this one, you might like our podcast. So yeah, those are my 3 plugs.
Cheers, man. We'll put all of those links and the show notes at businessgrowth.marketing. Thanks once again, Dustin.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
Cheers, man. And as always, if you enjoyed the episode, a quick rating on your podcast channel or subscribe on YouTube goes a long way. And we'll catch you on the next one for more actionable, no BS marketing tips to grow your business and grow your revenue. Cheers for tuning in.